am ready.
Maybe?
Yeah.
The cameras are rolling.
November 30th, 2022. ChatGPT debuts in text-to-text, meaning you write something, it responds, it enters the public conscious. Do you remember how that felt?
Yeah, it was like, wow, I can ask, what a tornado is made of, and it will respond with something.
Only days later, I don't know when, text-to-image debuts in its early form, but then it gets good with like DALL-E and Midjourney and all this. So we have this modality, text-to-text, text-to-image. What is the natural extension? What's text-to-video? But after that, text-to-3D model. And I thought like it sucked, like there was something called Edge Runner for a while, but it turns out over the last year, even a year ago, really its image-to-3D diffusion has gotten really, really good to the point where you can use it in production, maybe for midground or background assets.
By the way, this video is sponsored by Squarespace. We're gonna talk about that later.
Cybertruck! Get the Cybertruck!
Even better. Also, Linda.
But it occurred to me, I've been taking photos of fruit, okay? So I go to my place, I just like lock myself in the bathroom, turn off the lights so it's very dark, and I take photos of fruit so that I can then do photogrammetry and get a high detail model.
I can attest to that.
And it occurs to me, am I wasting my time? Can I just take a single image of a fruit on my iPhone and convert that into a 3D model? The answer is yes. Is it as good? No. Is it almost as good? Kind of. In this video, I want to tell you the current state. Where are we in image to 3D? How can you use it for free? How can you pay for a service that makes it slightly more convenient and in some cases is slightly better? And what does this mean for 3D artists?
More importantly, I think the audience wants to know, how can you use it for fruit?
You can use it.
That is the most important use case.
What you're seeing on your screen right now is many fruits. I'm thinking apples, bananas, maybe a pineapple.
Maybe grapes,
I'm seeing grapes.
cherries,
You're seeing things right now.
a kumquat.
I'm gonna start off with the free option, of which there are many, but the one I'm gonna look at is called Trellis, which actually came out very, very recently and happens to be very, very good, made by Microsoft of all people. I found that this is very good. It's an image to 3D model, as all of these are basically. If you do text to 3D model, it makes an image in between as a step, and it seems like what it does is it creates like a lot of novel views, kind of predicting what it might look like from other sides and then synthesizing a model. We have a Hugging Face demo, which I will link to in the description. If you don't know, Hugging Face is a way to run these models for dummies. We're just going to drop an image in here, we're going to click generate, and it's going to make us 3D models that we can download. I'm going to do 3 tests for everything I try. I'm going to try pinecone, we have a wrench, and then we're going to try kind of the hardest one, which is a house with a lot going on, like there's occlusions, a chair, etc. Note that the background doesn't really matter because it's going to remove it anyways. I'm going to start off with the pinecone, which is pretty difficult. It already removed the background, I believe, using REMBG, remove background. Click generate, you wait for some amounts of seconds, and you see once it starts, within 20 seconds, it's done. Okay? And if you tell me this isn't shockingly good, you are shockingly lying and stupid. I mean, look at this. So I'm going to extract the GLB, which you can set all these things for. I'm going to do a 1K texture. And while that runs, let me like do a second generation. And once again, we have our wrench. Notice that it synthesized details on the bottom that don't make sense. That is something that can happen if you give it a shape it's not really familiar with. I'm surprised this happened with a wrench, and maybe that will make you feel better as a 3D artist. I'm going to do the house, which by far is the most complicated case. There are settings, most important of which is the sampling steps, which basically says, how much time are you going to use to compute this? So honestly, if I bump this up, presumably, I don't know if it's going to be better, but it's definitely going to calculate for longer. And here you can see we have the GLB of the pinecone, and here is the wrench. I'm going to download the pinecone. I'm going to download the wrench, and here is the house. It did actually seem to capture the chair. It made it a bench, but like, look, it put a window where it didn't see, etc. This time, let's bump up the texture size to 2K. And what you are going to see is we have a bunch of GLB files that should have everything packed in. I believe nowadays we live in a click and drag territory, so let's drag this in, pack images, blah, 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 import GLTF. And here you can see the pinecone model. Very interestingly, its geometry isn't too dense. This is going to be different for some of the other ones we're going to deal with. Here is kind of like the shaded version. Let's see what's actually going on under the hood. It basically just has a texture that it generated. It runs it through some stuff and does a principled BSDF. We can also generate a normal map, just kind of guessing what it would be using a bump, connect that there, and now we have a normal mapping as well. Here is our silly little wrench, and here is our much better house. Like from here, looks pretty real to me. Okay, let's move on to a paid option that seems to have more customizability, but at the cost of money. There's this big question of like, is like image to 3D or using these things in production ethical? Or really there's the same discussion over like text to image. And the answer is no, but a lot of things are not ethical, okay? So I've this friend who really sticks to this, but he says, do I want to be left behind? No. So here's how I see it. This is the story I always tell. And this is what I tell the grandchildren. Imagine you're in the 1800s, whenever the camera just came out, and you're a painter. You're painting portraits of the aristocrats, the very rich, the wealthy, the people that need to be immortalized in a painting. And quite frankly, your skill is very valuable because it takes a lot of time and you got to make like networking inroads with these rich people. Yet,
somebody comes out with the camera where essentially with a button click, I'm sure it was more difficult then, but with a button click, you get something that obviously is faster, but is more realistic than anything you can paint. You might feel, oh, this is fake, it has no artistry, but in reality, you're scared. You're scared that a man with a button just outdid you, and you just wasted your life painting like presidents and stuff like that. But the camera led to so much industry, and people are like, oh, if it's replacing us, there's no way it's gonna make more jobs. All of media, Netflix, photos, like every social media is built on a bedrock of fucking images and videos. All of that is the camera in essence. So if you take this tiny sad job of being a painter, like it created millions of like other like industries and shit like that. Now it seems like, oh, how can image to 3D, like all the 3D artists are gonna go out? Maybe. We can't prophesize, and I know people are like, this is different. I don't think so.
Well, the camera wasn't like sentient. Not that like image to 3D is, but like the camera, you have to like pose the camera, click the button. And this one you do have to do a prompt. Like it's just much less, but I guess you still have to edit. Why is it unethical though?
So the way these models work, you give it data and it makes a prediction. I give it this image, it predicts what the 3D model looks like, and it does this over and over and over again. If you are doing this, that means you have images and you have 3D models. Where did you get those 3D models?
Oh, like from people that did not consent to have
A lot of time.
like scraped. I see.
More ramblings to come, but first I need to say that this video is sponsored by Squarespace. This is a service that lets you make beautiful websites. I made my website, www.cgmatter.com. Happens to be a static one, which is easy to do because there's all this like HTML integration. And here are 3 reasons you should be using Squarespace. The first of which, and this is kind of new, there is a AI built-in feature. So if you have text and you want to populate it with a description or a synopsis or whatever, you can just do that instead of like copying from somewhere else. There's an asset library baked right in there. So I host early access versions of my tutorial in that directory, so I can just upload from there. And third of all, speaking of early access tutorials, there's a member only area where I share like assets, Blender files, etc. Squarespace makes that super easy because they accept every payment method under the sun, PayPal, credit cards, etc. Head over to Squarespace, make a website, and when you're ready to launch, click the link below to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. For the second leg of our trip, we're transitioning over to a website called Meshy AI. This seems to kind of be the standard as for paid solutions to this, if you can call it a solution. They have some weird social media thing. I don't care about that. So I'm going to go to image to 3D. I'm going to start off with the pine cone so we can compare and generate. Okay, so when it's done, one thing you are going to notice is unlike Trellis, it's going to give 4 options, very reminiscent of Midjourney does the same thing. I'm just going to pick one that kind of looks correct. Click continue. It's almost a million vertices from the get-go, or a million faces. But that is why the remesh exists. You could say, oh, I want to limit this to 30,000 quads. Click confirm. And then you do that, you do texturing, etc. A benefit of Meshy is I believe you can do like concurrent things. Like you don't just have to do one at a time. I'm going to try the wrench model. And while we do that, why not also the house? For the wrench, it looks like the model is of much higher quality. This one might be good, even though it has floating islands, because we can correct for that in Blender. And then for the house, this is where it gets really impressive. I'm going to go for one that has the minimum number of holes, which seems to be top left. Now, over at the pine cone, we have the retopologized 30,000 faces. You can see the wireframe. The retopo seems to be pretty good. I'm not a quadriflow retopo bro, so I don't know. And then if you go to material preview, you're not going to see anything. That's because we don't have a texture, which can be synthesized either from the image itself, which would make sense. You want to have the pinecone texture come from the actual thing we generated from, or you could just use like a text thing. So let's do like photo realistic pinecone 50 millimeter 4K. Basically, I'm just typing in words that are synonymous with quality. And then for the wrench, for the texture, let's try to use the image itself. And then definitely the same thing for the house because it's so specific. The moment of truth, we do the material view, and it is indeed a pine cone. Remember, this was the text input, so it synthesized its own thing. I mean, honestly, other than these black regions, pretty good. I guess I would have gone for an image. Oh, it turns out there is like healing brushes and stuff. Let's actually try that. So I'm just going to select this area that has those black tips, which I imagine we'll just do like image in painting in a UV space. Smart healing. I said smart healing. Oh, it did try to do something. We do have some settings like what kind of file we want to export, including a blend file. So I'm going to do that since I am a Blender head. I do know you can do PBR, so we'll also take this and guess where there's ambient occlusion, normal maps, etc. Let's download the other two. So the wrench actually used the image, even though it didn't seem to preserve any of the text. Well, let's download it. And then finally for the house, I feel like this is where the texture worked the best, except it put a door on the side, even though I do think there was a door defined in the image. Download the boy. And assuming you downloaded the blends directly, you're going to get this with the textures packed inside. And yeah, by default, it just makes a super low resolution base color. I'm sure that can be upscaled. As for the UV space, it has an unwrap that looks like this. Leave something to be desired. Again, it's just the base color, but if I make a little city out of this, I'm going to make a big plane. This is like, it's going to be suburbia, But the difference is this is like a log cabin suburbia. This civilization, or this upper middle class, moved into the woods, and yay, we have our little suburbia, I guess. So I think where Meshy is better than Trellis is in some of its settings of basically making 4 generations instead of 1, and then you get to go to other steps where you get to re-roll and redo them, unlike the Hugging Face demo for Trellis that is easier, but you don't get much control, at least without going into the actual code, which I will not. We can't prophesize, and I know people are like, this is different. I don't think so.
Well, the camera wasn't like sentient. Not that like image to 3D is, but like the camera, you have to like pose the camera, click the button. And this one, you do have to do a prompt. Why is it unethical though?
So the way these models work, you give it data and it makes a prediction. I give it this image, it predicts what the 3D model looks like, and it does this over and over and over again. If you are doing this, that means you have images and you have 3D models. Where did you get those 3D models?
Oh, like from people that did not consent to have
A lot of time.
like scraped. I see. So the unethical thing. So like in a perfect world, if you had a image generator that was made by like data where the like artists consented.
They have done that. They made a data set that's fully like, you know, people who consented and making tiny dividends.
There are
and now you have to argue against it. Now it is just shit. I'm being replaced. There's no ethical like blah blah.
Right.
Now, the last feature or option I want to show you is something called BlenderGPT. Really, it does the exact same thing. It's image to 3D, but the only difference is now there's a bridge using an add-on to send models directly to Blender. I actually just talked to the guy a few days ago who made it. Currently, it is on this like waitlist model, but I believe he is releasing soon. At least that's what he said. Very smart guy, gonna be like a billionaire at 23 kind of guy. Either way, I'm going to log in because I already have an account. And already there are some things that are different since the last time I used it. There's this version 1, version 2 that wasn't there. And now he combined this like text and image thing. So without further ado, let's do our experiments. We will start with the pinecone generate. And now you can see it's down in the queue. Gonna close that. And I imagine you can do concurrent. So let's do a wrench and let's do our house. So in terms of speed and easy to use, it does remind me of the Polycam UI, and I told him this. So good job with that. I am having trouble putting this third one in the queue. That might be because of a limit. But the pinecone is pineconed with a texture. We'll download that in a second. The wrench has now wrenched. It actually kept a bit of the text. That's a record for this one. And now let's try the house. While this loads, you should know it looks like a free website situation. It is not. So if you go to settings, there is a credit system that goes into like this monthly subscription thing. I think when you get this for the first time, they give you like 2 or 3 generations to get you hooked, basically. And finally, moment of truth among many moments. We have the house, which seems about on par with the others. So again, like I said, the word Blender is in here because there's a bridge. So when you go to this website the first time, it's going to tell you haven't downloaded the add-on, you should do that. And once you install this add-on, which was only working in 4.2 last I tried, I'm sure you fixed it. You have this add-on, you turn it on, and this is going to be basically a listener that waits for the website to say, I'm sending you a model, and then it will import it. On the website, I'm going to hit send to Blender. I haven't been able to get this shortcut to work. Send to Blender button. I will click it manually. And it seems to have done nothing, which is new because it used to do something. I wonder if it's under development again. Oh well, that's what's up at the moment of recording. Let's download the GLB manually. Gonna do that for the wrench, gonna do that for the pinecone, and just drag those in like a Neanderthal. Import GLTF. Now, one thing I have noticed that is different about this, that isn't the case with Meshy AI, it isn't the case with Trellis, is if you go into the shader, no, he literally changed the shit. Never mind. Before it was using the vertex color as a attribute. Now it seems to generate a texture and seems to retopologize. Both of these are actually new. I wonder if he changed the underlying model in version 2. Well, all this basically shows how not up to date I am with the changes that have been made. But this is definitely an option if you want Blender integration, which I imagine will be back up in a moment. And there you have it. 3 different options. You have Trellis as a free option. Honestly, maybe the best option. It's really good. If you want a lot of features, I would go for Meshy. And if you want simplicity that should have Blender integration working eventually, it is BlenderGPT. There you go. It seems like the current state of the union to image to 3D is it is shockingly better than I thought it was. Its main lacking area is projecting the texture back for some reason. Like it just kind of gets rid of the detail and it smudges the colors, and it couldn't keep that logo on the wrench, for example. But as for mesh generation, again, I keep saying over and over and over again, medium and background objects, perfect. This isn't even mentioning like manual intervention where you then, mess with the model, do a bit of sculpting, etc. So this has been a valuable investigation for me, at least.